Hi, good morning or evening or afternoon or whenever you're watching this. This is going to be week one of what I've kind of called the wealth creation ladder and financial decision making PowerPoint. This is kind of a class about general personal finance. I'll talk a little bit about my background, but I promise I have some idea about personal finance, and I wanted to help kind of make these classes for specifically individuals that are part of the community that I'm a part of, and hopefully this can help lead to really just kind of better outcomes for some of the guys that I work with. But we'll kind of just jump into it. Yeah, first week it's going to be we're going to talk about something called the wealth creation ladder. It's a specific series of steps to wealth attainment. Um, and we're also going to talk about financial decision making, both micro decisions and macro decisions, and how those kind of are a fundamental part of our day-to-day lives, specifically as it relates to making decisions about the hard-earned money that you're making and kind of making decisions that help progress your really your net worth over time. So that's kind of the goal of this week. Hopefully, I'll keep this video to under 30 minutes, but we'll see. I do tend to talk longer than I should sometimes. So I'll try to keep it, be respectful of your time, and try to keep this to about 30 minutes. But we'll see how long we go. I teach this class in a Zoom setting usually. So usually I take names of all the people, but that's not going to be super applicable for the YouTube format. So we're going to skip that part. Anyways, welcome. These are just general personal finance educational classes. So this is kind of a breakdown of what we'll cover today. I'll give you a little bit of an introduction about my story and my professional background. We'll talk about that wealth creation ladder. Again, the specific steps in which wealth attainment is achieved, I would say, for most individuals. We'll talk about money and decision making. Again, that micro and macro kind of financial decision making. And we're probably not going to have a Q&A, but feel free if you have questions, you can leave them in the comments, and definitely hopefully address those. So yeah, just a little bit about me, and about my story, and just kind of about how I've gotten to this point of I guess making personal finance videos on YouTube for addicts and alcoholics. Though you don't have to be an addict or an alcoholic to get a lot of really good information out of these. That is kind of the primary purpose for why I'm making these. Um, so in I think this was about in 2010. This is at Stagecoach. That's a country music festival. Um, Over there, I'd graduated high school and going into college, and had a pretty successful, I would say, pretty successful college career over at Cal State Fullerton. Um, I was one of the graduation speakers for the Department of Speech Communication Studies, so I got a speech and debate scholarship while I was at Cal State Fullerton, and also the commencement speaker. And then I went into work. It's kind of a long story of how I took this. I thought I was going to be an attorney, and actually partying at USC with this guy. A USC dad offered me an internship at New York Life, and that kind of got me down the financial services career, and that's how I kind of went down that route instead of becoming an attorney. And all the professors that I talked to had said, "Don't become an attorney; it's a trap." financial trap. You'll hate your life, you'll hate your work. So that didn't sound super appealing. So when a gentleman by Dan offered me an internship at New York Life, and I didn't even go to USC. I went to Cal State Fullerton. I thought, wow, this is, kids are paying $250,000 to go to the school just for this exact opportunity. So I told them yes, and that kind of took me down the financial services career. So here's me in 2019 working for a very major financial firm. I'll try not to disclose who that is, but I have a pretty unique name. You can look up my LinkedIn if you're super interested. I'll also show you my resume just to kind of give some credibility to what I'm actually presenting because yeah. Yeah, I was in kind of secret on the road to becoming or had always been an alcoholic. I was drinking 10 to 14 drinks a night and quite a bit. This was going on just about every single night from I would say 2014 to 2022 when I eventually got sober. I was holding it down. I was holding the job down great for a while, but it just progressively started getting worse and worse. And here's a rough timeline of just some of the I don't know, pictures speak a thousand words. Just yeah, had some really difficult um, time in active alcoholism. Keep in mind, I'm holding down a white collar job. I'm responsible for quite a bit of money, or at least am a representative for the firm that I'm working at for clients, and at this time, and COVID happened. That I don't think that was great for anyone who was, of the alcoholic type or addictive type during that time. Very isolating, and it really just things were not going great from a personal standpoint for me. From a professional standpoint, things were absolutely fine. No one knew at work that I was dealing with this in my personal life, but I certainly knew. Um, and yeah, this went on for another about 2 years. This is Diet Pepsi, by the way. So that's my new drink. I used to drink Bud Light. That was nothing but the choices. And anyways, so it went on for two very long years, more after kind of those pictures were taken, and it just kind of got to a point where I was not able to really function well as a human being with how much I was drinking. I had tried to get sober before. I was unsuccessful many times, countless times. It's when you look in the mirror and you say, I'm not going to drink today. And then sure enough, 5 o'clock rolls around and you're drinking. And no, I don't even know how many times that happened. But it finally I was at a point where I could not go on living with alcohol in my life. And I could also not imagine that I would ever be able to stop drinking. And my solution was a very large window on the 11th floor of the condo building I was living in at that time. So pretty irrevocable solution. Thankfully, a kind of few people really came into my life and helped me when I really needed it, and they saved my life, and they got me into kind of the whole rehabilitation process and sober living, and a couple of pictures of me in bunk beds here in the sober living. And this is also COVID was kind of like still happening. So I got sober September 25th, 2022. And, there's still like COVID going on. So picture me in sober living with COVID and bunk beds. And then, yeah, just unfortunately, I met a lot of really good people in that sober living, but part of our community is a lot of people, unfortunately, will die to the disease. And this is a gentleman I got to know really well. He's a good friend of mine in the house, and unfortunately, he passed away. And you know, as did a couple of other people that I got to know. The last one's really weird. When I got my job back and was working in a different branch, there was a kid. I say kid, he's probably 22, 23 years old. And, he wasn't even, to the best of my knowledge, and I feel like I'm pretty good at being able to identify if someone's of my type, if you will, alcoholic or addict. And this, kid, he's getting his licenses, and he ultimately didn't come into work one day, and we got notified that Arthur had passed away. And not a whole lot of reasons a 22 or 23-year-old just wakes up, or doesn't wake up, and after a music concert, and it's just sad. It's just very real, kind of what we deal with. But anyways, like I said, I've fortunately been able to stay sober since September 25th, 2022. That's my sobriety date. And in that time, I guess I put the company name there, but I was rehired by the company. I do go to a 12-step meeting. I'm just going to be respectful of their, well, I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's 12-step I use. And it's worked very well for me. I know people have opinions about various 12-step groups. I'm not here to even talk about that, but anyways, moved to Pasadena. I was living in Long Beach, and I was able to sponsor people. I trying to sponsor people. I live in Thailand now. I'll just kind of jump here because I was able to kind of quasi retire here. But yeah, basically decided after I got my job back, moved to Pasadena, started working out the Pasadena branch, which was great because in my profession, the more money clients have, that is better for us because as the traditional financial advisor route, we're basically leeches. And the more money that our clients have when we're charging, or I should say a firm is charging, we're getting a portion of that 1%. If the dollar amount is larger that the client has, that 1% goes further. So Pasadena, California was a very good area to be working at that time. And then probably still is and probably will continue to be just because it's a lot of generational wealth down there. But yeah, I was working there for 16 months and I was not super satisfied with my career. And about, I would say 10 months prior, before my actual like date that I decided I'm going to move to Thailand, um, I'd started this planning process of like, how am I going to make this move? And 2 weeks before I've already bought the plane ticket, one-way plane ticket. I've sold a lot of my stuff. My job has no idea. And 2 weeks before I'm supposed to move, they offer me a vice president position, a wealth planner position. And I ultimately I delayed. Let me think about it, which managers thought was strange that I had to think about like a rather large promotion. And I ultimately turned it down because there are some things, especially once you have a little bit of money in your pocket, that become a lot more important than more money in your pocket. That's one of the benefits of this whole thing, that you start to be able to put value systems once you're in a stable financial position. Money starts to begin to take a back seat to values, and I think that's how it always should be. But unfortunately, in our uh, global capitalist environment that we all find ourselves in, money oftentimes takes a front seat to other very important values in our lives. And I was fortunate enough to not be hurting for money so bad that I had to put things in the back seat, like my own happiness and fulfillment, for money. Um, and I was able to do that. I was able to get to that point because of the exact things that I'm trying to also share with not only others in my community, addicts and alcoholics, but also really for anyone who's interested in learning about this. And I try to do it in an understandable way, and a way that hopefully makes sense. Um, but yeah, anyways, so I moved to Thailand, and I did that because I was able to practice something called geo arbitrage. Basically, in short, the money that I had made working in the US now here in Thailand, or any other lower cost of living country, can go significantly further. And that's the technical term for that is geo arbitrage. Make money in a different country and then move to a different country that's lower cost of living, or have a job that might be virtual at a different firm in a different country, but live in a lower cost of living. So that's what I did. It's a rather kind of extreme financial move to make, but I am really glad that I did it, and I'm sure I'll make a video just kind of about that. Anyways, um, yeah, I'm really happy now. My life, versus those pictures I showed earlier, versus where my life is now. These are the two individuals that saved my life. Um, I owe my being alive today to them. And it was me and my mom. We took a trip to Seattle for her retirement. I wanted to do something nice for her when she retired. And here are a bunch of my friends back in California. This is us at the Huntington Gardens, which I always loved going to the Huntington Gardens. Talk about generational wealth. That's a family that generational wealth there. But anyways, these are a bunch of my friends that I, love and care for deeply, as they do for me now. And my life is it's changed completely. And I attribute that almost exclusively to getting sober. Uh, I would not have had this. I wouldn't have had anything. I'd be dead. Um, anyways, when talking about money, I think it's important to kind of discuss this. When talking, any YouTube people um, at the barbecue, and someone, hey, I've got a hot stock, or just I would first thing I would encourage you to be very wary of. That is also an AI generated image. I think I really like the picture it made of me. But anyways, that's an AI if you're sitting there wondering. Um, Back on track, Torian. When you're discussing money, or when someone is trying to give you advice, I feel is very important to look at a couple of things. One, are they educated on this topic? Do they go to school for this? Do they have certain certifications? Mainly, I would look out for the certified financial planner. Although that is not the end all be all. I've met a lot of people with the CFP that, quite frankly, don't really know what they're talking about. So you can't always just trust that. For myself, I have a master's in science and financial planning. I'm also a board certified financial planner. I also have a Series 7 and a 66 and the life and health, at least for California. Those are all inactive now. These are all inactive since I don't work for a firm anymore. I don't sell any products, which is it's great to not have to do that part and just be able to give like advice without, excuse me, not advice, education without, yeah, without having to sell any bullshit. Um, anyways, be very make sure the person's educated or has some formal training. I would also say that it's probably important to understand what their motives are. This might even be the primary before education. As someone who worked in this industry, I would be very wary of anyone who is trying to sell you or gets compensated uh, for selling you financial services or products. Just be very careful of that. I will probably make a separate video talking about all of this, but generally, that it may not be in your best interest. And I'm not saying it's very prominent in the industry, commissions and assets under management, like a 1% for us to manage your money, right? That's unfortunately, in my opinion, very prominent in the industry. It's hard to find someone who doesn't work that way. But just be aware that that is always in a representative's, I wouldn't even say back of mind. It's at the front of their mind when they're talking to you about financial, whether they're giving you advice or planning or whatever. It is always front of mind because of training as well, and because food on their table and the betterment of their own lives depends on it. Uh, to sell you what will generate the highest amount of income for themselves and may not necessarily be the best advice, education, etc., for your actual situation. So, motive and do they actually know what they're talking about? Do they have certification and such? Anyways, this is my resume. I just wanted to kind of provide this as I generally have a good idea of what I'm talking about. Not always. There's a lot of things I'm sure I probably get wrong. But generally, at least, I have a lot of things that that say I'm a lot smarter than I actually am. That's probably the best way to put it. Anyways, just in summary, I worked at a major financial services firm for almost a decade, not fully a decade, but I've been in the financial services industry since 2013. I didn't even put the other the other one on there. So moving on, abrupt transition. Sorry about that. So relationship with money. This is important to be aware of, kind of from a jumping into this topic. So everyone's relationship with money is going to be different. Um, Even though we all use money, at least unless you're living in some area, and if you don't use money, I'd love to know how you don't do that. It's actually a very interesting topic, like a society without money. I'd love to kind of explore how that could possibly work. Um, but anyway, like I said, I get off topic quite a bit. Um, Everyone's relationship with money is going to be different. And a lot of this has to do with upbringing. A lot of it has to do with um, how our parents or your parents may have viewed money. So it's important to be aware of these, what the kind of academic term is money scripts. Um, Essentially, your psychological perspective or the narratives or the perceptions that you have about money that are unique to your experiences with money. So for example, I had some clients that their parents had gone through the Great Depression. So they were very, um, they were very hesitant about spending money on anything that was not completely essential because that's what their parents had taught them about money. Um, and you have to understand, like some of these individuals have $4 or $5 million and can take trips comfortably with being financially responsible or buy the new car or things like that. But a lot of them had these money scripts that, especially if there's a couple of clients that, parents had been through the Great Depression or grandparents had, and this idea that money should be saved and really squirreled away, which generally I agree with, but to not use it for anything for other than essentials. That was something that I helped clients work through. In a way, like is a little bit. I'm not a licensed therapist, but in a way, the job had a lot of parallels with therapy. Um, some clients, exact opposite. Money's meant to be spent, and you know, any discussion of like inheritance for children or grandchildren was kind of out of the question. They'll get what they get. It's I am going to spend this money, or my spouse and I are going to spend this money to our heart's content because we worked hard for it, and that's fine too. Like neither one is right or wrong. But it's important to be aware of these money scripts that you may have as an individual. So something that I'm not going to give homework, but I do think it's important to reflect on the idea of money and like what are some things that like are beliefs that I have regarding money, and then a step further, like where may I have maybe picked some of those beliefs up. I just think it's very important to have some self awareness around that. Um, so, what do finance have to do with sobriety and mental health? And again, like if you're not in the cohort of addict, alcoholic, you can just skip through the section. But I do think it's important for specifically the community that I'm part of, and I would like to reach with these videos. So money is unfortunately it's a really big factor in our lives. Just kind of the geopolitical, or that's not the correct word, the geocapitalist environment that we live in. Money has a tremendous amount of influence in kind of the well-being of individuals. And I think that's kind of unfortunate personally, but it is what it is, right? Um, so let's first stress. I think that's a really no-brainer. When you're stressed about money, it may be more prone to relapse because things might feel helpless, especially if you're in a debt trap, which I'll talk about debt in week two. Um, it can lead to interpersonal problems, which my parents got divorced over money issues, and that has formed a pretty big money script that, like, for a long time, I thought you got to have money to be loved. And I know now that that's not entirely true, but I yeah. Anyways, peer pressure. You see people making more money. Uh, it might make you feel less than. Um, Low self-efficacy. You're, again, unfortunately, like I don't think any person's self-efficacy is determined by how much money they have. But again, in the geo-capitalist environment that we find ourselves in, there is a lot of pressure to make more money, and money is like the success metric. And again, I think that's not. And I met I've met a lot of people, have a lot of money, and quite frankly, I would not label them a success. Um, they're awful human beings, and I kind of not happy that not super happy that I ever knew them. But there's some people with money that are great human beings. It's. I guess what I'm trying to say is it can lead to low self-efficacy, but by no means is a person's worth entirely dictated around money. And I hope we all know that, but I just in kind of the world in which we live in, I think that's not said enough. Positive moods. Maybe you make a lot of money. Maybe you make a lot of money. That can be a trigger for relapse, and it's important to know that positive uh, financial windfalls can also lead to a manic episode, or it can lead to I'm on top of the world. Like, of course I can have a drink, or take that drug or whatever. So it's important to be aware that like money can have a lot of mainly stress triggers, but also can have a lot of emotional triggers that come with it. And then this one, exposure to triggers like lack of money, right, may mean that you are not able to live in the most safe type of environment, whether that's geographic location or housing or what have you. Um, so lack of money can lead someone to be in, especially if they're in recovery, be in uh, areas or situations more often that they probably should not be. Um, and it's important to note about these. So wealth creation ladder. Here we go. It's kind of the main thing for if you take anything away from this video, this is the main thing. So I'd say sobriety and mental wellness for, especially for an addict or alcoholic, sobriety is going to be primary because all bets are off. We are not living in sobriety, at least for me. That's been my experience. Um, and mental wellness, and I think that can apply to anyone. Um, and by mental wellness, I guess in scope for like a normal, a non-alcoholic or addict, what that could translate to is like temperance around not being greedy and not being fearful. And I'll talk more about that, specifically investing, but greed, especially when you get into the stock market. I've seen a lot of money lost because clients were greedy. I've seen a lot of money not made and lost because clients were very fearful. So it's important to have a healthy balance really between those two, and maintain uh, fit mental wellness. I guess the best way to a fit mental perspective when approaching this topic. But so that's going to be the cornerstone. And it's kind of just you want to go into looking at these actual steps in with that kind of mindset, if that makes sense. So, look, number one, this might be a no-brainer, but we need to generate income that is greater than our expenses. Now, to me, that seems like a no-brainer, but you would not believe how many of my colleagues are making, quite frankly, more money than they should have been making, and we're still in debt. they're they're spending more. These are we were people making more than $250,000 a year, and they're spending more than that because they want a certain lifestyle. I'll make more so I can pay the debt. They're buying houses that were just like I don't know. You bought yourself a coffin. You're going to be paying that thing off for the rest of your life. Um, anyways, uh, generate income greater than expenses. You need to position yourself in a way that you have money to be able to save. That's kind of the easiest way I can put that, because if you do not have that, we cannot progress up the ladder. It will be impossible to progress up the ladder if your expenses are greater than your income. It does not work. Because then you fall into debt, and that creates a vicious spiral downwards from a financial perspective. Um, so we need to generate income greater than expenses. Number two, and I would put this at number two. Some people disagree personally. It's math that it's math. I'll leave it at that. You do not want compounding working against you. So number two is no bad debt. You cannot progress up the ladder if you have any bad debt. And by bad debt, I mainly mean like credit card or high interest rate loans. It will not work. You have compounding interest working against you, and it's math. That is not going to. It is highly unlikely that you will be able to progress up the next rungs of the ladder, um, at least effectively, if you are carrying bad debt. And again, this is a personal finance class. This is not a business finance class. I'm aware that debt can sometimes be used as a tool, especially in business. Uh, we're talking about personal individuals here. Okay. Um, Let me also back up. This has been generated from working with, uh, at least over 1,000 people, if not more, probably very likely more. Um, and for the really successful individuals at kind of all stages of life, mainly I worked with older clients because they had enough, they they had the most amount of time to accumulate assets. So those were the clients we wanted to work with. Um, but what I've kind of seen, and through my own experience as well in accumulating wealth, these are the steps that I did. This is how I did it, and it was important to do it in these specific orders, because doing it in these specific order um, alleviates risk when you move on to the next step. So I just kind of want to say that because it is important that like you do these things, at least in my experience, that most individuals who will be, what we consider wealthy, millionaires or multimillionaires, are going to get there um, by doing this, and usually in this order. Um, are there going to be one shot, you're a rap star, you came out of nowhere and now you're a multimillionaire? Sure. But I think from a probability standpoint, most individuals, if they are going to ascertain millions or multi-millions of dollars, are going to are going to come about that wealth by doing it this way. And I'll just say for myself, I do not come from money. Um, and I was able to obtain, a certain degree of wealth, uh, not from, a lucky thing. It was a lot of hard work and determination, and I did get lucky. I did get lucky in my job, and I happened to go into an industry that was very well paying, but um, it's not like hey, here's a check for a couple $1 million one day. It was very systematic in following these steps in the order in which I've kind of outlined here. And that's in my experience working with clients and hearing their stories. This is like these steps in this order is kind of the blueprint of how most individuals will obtain that kind of level of wealth. Um, anyways, so emergency fund. Need to have an emergency fund because life, oh, excuse me. Um, Life is going to happen. There are going to be situations that you do not foresee, like that sneeze. That's a mild one, but there will be big sneezes in life that will happen, and it's important whether that's car accident or medical thing. Now you have a out of pocket medical expense. Job loss is a big one. Shoot, I got fired. I need still have to pay my rent or my mortgage, or I still have to buy food. I still have to pay my insurance premium, especially if you have a family, right? It's important to have an emergency fund so that you have a safety net to rely on when ultimately an emergency occurs. And we're human beings, and it will happen at some point in your life. I hope it doesn't. I hope you're the only person who never had an emergency their entire life. But for most individuals, they're going to experience at least one, if not multiple, emergencies throughout their life that they're going to need money to help get them through. Excuse me. So number four, saving for retirement. Need to save for retirement. This is going to come before saving for other goals for specific reasons, tax benefits, and there's usually, aside from tax benefits, there may be matching or free money associated with doing this. You can always do that first, and then savings for other goals, right? This could be cars, education for kids or for yourself. This could be, let me back up there. When I said education, that would be probably for children. If you need education for yourself, that should probably come here. You should probably take out a loan, which is not bad debt, which I'll explain, because a loan for education, so long as you are going to finish and then go into a high paying career field, um, is an investment. That's not a bad debt. Credit card debt is not an investment. You're buying material items that are typically cannot be resold for the value at which you bought them or a higher value later. They're not assets; they're depreciating assets, right? So savings for other goals, education for the kids. This could be taking a vacation. This could be just more wealth attainment, right? That's what I did. And then number six is financial perpetuity. Once you get to a point where you have accumulated so much assets that the rate of return at which the assets are producing or the income that the assets are producing is more than what your expenses are and what you expect your expenses are or will be for the remainder of your life, you have reached financial perpetuity. Once you've reached that, you can then begin looking at generational goals. This would be like legacy or charitable planning or things of that nature, things that you are going the money is going to out you are going to, how do I put this? You will not be able to spend, or very likely you are not going to spend all of the money in your own lifetime. So you then begin considering generational goals. For most people, this is the one that they really want to reach. And unfortunately, for most people, they will, there's this like narrative that like people will not reach this until at least this age. And that did not sound super appealing to me. I did not want to spend the prime years of my life in an office in a suit, even though it was a nice suit. I don't like wearing a suit. I'd rather wear a t-shirt and shorts. I'm wearing right now. And yeah, the retire or do what you want to do and not use your time to give to a company. Um, you don't get to do the things that you want to do really with your time until 65. Uh, didn't really jive with me. And meeting a lot of clients and seeing them progress as they got older, and seeing clients at different age groups really solidified that I do not want to wait that long to do what spend the valuable time that I get on on Earth, in an office in a suit doing something that I'd rather not be doing. So hopefully, in following this systematic process, it will allow you to reach financial perpetuity in a more efficient manner. And really, like the formula, as I call it, for creating wealth is make that a little bigger. Is quite simple. Have income that's greater than expenses. If you have debt, you pay the debt. If you don't have debt, or once the debt is paid, you buy assets. Assets are rapidly, or maybe not rapidly, but generally expected things like stocks or real estate, or real estate's not a great asset, by the way. Stocks are the best one. Um, anyways, something that will appreciate in value. Pokemon cards. I was just listening to something that Pokemon cards have like outpaced the S&P 500 by quite a significant margin. So collectors are like buying that as like their retirement. Might be a little risky, but it's working. Bitcoin, another one, purchase assets. It is a currency, but it's an asset. It is something that generally has expectation that it will appreciate over time. That's what I'm trying to get to. Allow the assets to appreciate or generate income. Repeat that every month. And then, yeah, you just keep on doing that over and over and over um, until you reach financial perpetuity, right? And you can do that in a couple of different ways, like building the emergency fund, saving for retirement, saving for other goals. Emergency fund, in terms of accounts, this would be a cash management account, not a bank account. We'll talk about that in week 3. Don't use a bank account. They're awful from a like generating this very old knowledge or I don't know, old wisdom. Like you should open a savings account. Savings accounts are terrible. pay nothing. Saving for retirement, IRAs, 401ks, Roths, 403bs, 457s, 401a, right? There's a lot of fours. But anyways, there are multiple different TSPs, multiple different retirement accounts available. And then saving for other goals is mainly going to be brokerage accounts, right? But yeah, you just generally like you allocate those to those various account types. Income is greater than your expenses. What's left over? Pay down debt. If you don't have any debt any longer, you buy assets in those various account types. You allow the assets to appreciate, and you do that every single month. Then it'll be, I don't know, for me, about 18 years later, uh, I looked at my account and I said, how much more do I need? I think I'm set. Um, I started doing this at 18. So it's less 16, 16 years later. And it's not rocket. Like again, like I got how many letters? 7 letters behind my name. And it's not I really didn't need that much schooling uh to to figure it out like in one slide. Like this is how you make wealth. There is generally not a magic bullet. It's pretty simple. It's addition and subtraction. That's it. But yeah, this is the blueprint. And there's a very, again, there are specific reasons why this should be followed in a specific order, because doing it in this order and making sure that this is accomplished before we move on to here, and this is accomplished before we move on to here. What it does is it prevents risk, or it helps mitigate against major risk. And that can really derail someone. And the main risk is if something happens in life, which it will, you don't have to rely on debt to get out of it. Because as we'll talk about in kind of compounding, um, that's you do not want compounding interest working against you. It is the biggest setback, and that is debt or bad debt specifically. So let's talk about yeah, kind of the decision making. So I'm just going to put this here. Financial wellness, it's made through major and micro decision making. That's all this really is. Like it's major and micro decisions. So I encourage individuals to think of finances in percentage terms. For me, that has really helped a lot. Um, and we'll use an example of like you go into 7-Eleven, micro decision, and you have, I'm thirsty. You're driving, I'm thirsty, need some water, pull over, go into 7-Eleven, and I'm about to make a micro financial decision. I get to the water, I don't know, not machine, the refrigeration unit, whatever. And you've got 20 different choices of water, right? And you see, I could buy Aquafina, or I could buy some of these more, I don't know, designer water brands, I guess. Um, and I want you to think about what's the goal here. Okay. I'm thirsty. I need water. Water will hydrate. The goal is to be hydrated, right? That's ultimately the goal of why we are going to buy the water. Aquafina will hydrate you. Evian Voss or Liquid Death will also hydrate you. The three down here are going to be 158 more percent more expensive than this option, and they will accomplish the exact same goal. Think of your financial decisions in percentages. Like this is especially applicable for a car, right? I need a car to get from point A to point B reliably and safely. Um, okay, we need reliability, we need safety, right? Maybe a Honda Civic or a Toyota Camry can accomplish those things. Maybe a BMW 3 Series or a Mercedes. I don't even know the classes, like some class, right? Like just generally a Mercedes, right? Can do that also, but one is going to be 100, 150, 200% more in what it costs to buy or finance or, you know, it's this is how I want you to I would encourage you to think about your micro now buying a car that's kind of a major financial decision, but your day-to-day spending, your micro decision in percentage terms. And like this could be like eating in or eating out, right? Okay, I can cook grilled chicken breast, uh, make a side, right? Have a fairly satisfying meal. I'm not a great chef, so never quite as satisfying as eating out, but I can meet my nutritional needs by eating at home. Versus, and that might cost me, let's say $7 a meal. But if I go out to a restaurant, it's probably going to be at least $21 to go get a meal at a restaurant. Not here in Thailand. I'm talking about like back in the US, specifically back in Los Angeles. It's going to be probably at least $21 to eat at a restaurant, right? Um, that's it's three times as much versus me preparing the meal at home. Um, and both will accomplish the main goal of providing sustenance to my body, right? Now, there are reasons that you may want to go to a restaurant, meet with friends, or things like that. But your main daily provide sustenance to your body, radically reduce the amount of money you're spending by cooking home, right, versus always eating out. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. It's very helpful to think of your day-to-day micro decisions and spending habits not as, oh, it's only $2, right? It's only $2. It's 158% more. It sounds a lot different than it's only $2. And this is kind of it will change. At least it did for me. It changes kind of the way you look at pricing things. Another major financial decision. So like we're kind of getting in on step one here. Okay. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. Step one, right? We're starting to look at a couple of these things. So here, okay. Um, Major decision, right? And this is wealth ladder one and two, right? So steps one and two. Major decision. I will not go to college, or I will go to college. And I also put in trade school here because traditional college is not for everyone, and it's not always the right thing to do. And especially with like artificial intelligence, I do think that is a risk specifically to careers, and people do need to kind of weigh, uh, is this job potentially going to exist in 2 to 5 years, with advances, or 5 to 10 years, right? With the advances in that kind of aspect. So trade school is also something. Oh, Major decision. I'll live with my parents or a roommate, or I'll live on my own. One is going to cost significantly more money than others, right? Major decision. I'll purchase, here we go, like $25,000 car versus $15,000 car, right? And all of these things can be, percentages, how much percentage in income, right? Income, how much more is it in cost? How much more is it in cost, right? You can look at all of these from a percentage standpoint. And yeah, these are major, major decisions that can have a very lasting impact on your financial health and the how quickly you're able to progress up the rungs of the ladder, of the wealth ladder. Not making good financial decisions in the major decisions category will dramatically reduce how quickly you're able to progress up the ladder. Micro decisions still have an effect, but you know, and I would actually like I'll save 5% versus 10%. I would say that that's actually a pretty big um, decision there in your savings rate. But I think the water example is fine. Just your day-to-day purchases. If there's something that will do the same thing at relatively the same effectiveness, um, why would you pay more for the other thing? It just yet people do it all the time, and it's something and that might have to do with your money script, right? Because maybe you see wealth as designer things, right? Or like name brands. That's like what being successful means is you have the certain kind of purse or the I don't know, a certain kind of car, or like that's what success means. But I'll just tell you, many of my multi-million dollar clients, you would not know that the numbers that were in their accounts if you looked at least the cars that they drove up to the office. Um, Very unsuspecting vehicles. Some were, nicer than others, but they weren't by any means like super crazy on a whole. I do want to talk about this. So because I did kind of touch on it, you should make an investment in uh, your earnings potential over your life. And that does not have to be college. College is a very popular route, but it's a major, major decision. And you really have to be real and honest with yourself. If you are kind of a traditional learning, like book environment person, and you want a career in kind of more of that requires a more traditional college experience, or if trade school might be a better route for you. Or I would also put like certifications, right? Certs, right? The point is that here, this is the point is this educational attainment, certifications, additional training is going to be the single biggest factor and determinant in an individual's lifetime earnings or projected lifetime earnings of any other factor known. Um, so here we have, kind of a charts that show both men and women, but we're not here to compare genders, right, or sexes, or whatever language you want to use there. it's to look at the graduate degrees make the most, the bachelor's degrees make the second most, and then it goes downhill from there, right? If you have less than high school, you might crack a million. Um, if you have high school graduate, you're at 1.5. Some college, 1.7, right? That's 200, almost $300,000 more, $200,000. Bachelor's degree, right? You're almost doubling versus what it was on high school. And then graduate degree, you're fully graduating. And also keep in mind that these are kind of like the averages, you know. Beyond that, there are so yeah, educational. It's causally associated with different likelihoods belonging to integrated alcohol consumer typologies. We found that additional 3.61 years of education reduced the risk of alcohol dependency by about 50%. Um, Now, I was part of the other 50. I had a bachelor's. I had not completed my master's yet, but I did have a bachelor's, and I was unfortunately on the other side of that curve. But more education can, at least in general, lead to likelihood of staying sober longer as well. Um, but why is this such a big decision? It's important that like not all students who enroll in college graduate. Like 40% who enroll will not finish. And all that debt, if you took out debt for college, still stays with you. There is no declaring bankruptcy against educational debt. You can never get rid of it. And that's why traditional college is pushed because the banks make a lot of money um, from giving educational loans. And this is some of the things that you start to realize working in the financial services industry of just how kind of um, not great some things in the system are, how somewhat predatory they can be. So there's this narrative that you should go to college, which generally um, I would not always agree with, but that narrative is partly pushed and continued because banks make a lot of money from educational loans, and they know that they have lobbied so that you cannot declare bankruptcy on them. There is no way to get out of it. So once you take an educational loan and use that money, you have to pay it back. And if you're getting a private loan, the rate is relatively high. You have started in the debt trap. They have now, and you're probably 18. Um, which wow. Uh, Anyways, it's a now if you do graduate, we can see that the reward can be quite high. It is an investment in your future, but it's important to really be realistic with yourself and really look at, hey, am I more of a traditional college route kind of person? On the right here, sorry, I have a lot of things going on the screen. This shows, someone who went to college versus someone who went the trade route, and it basically explains that the risk of a general like college education cost, right, versus how much it costs for trade school, the risk of debt, how much you could have been saving, how much you come out ahead versus just straight up earnings, right? You have to take into account that you didn't have this much debt, and you actually come out ahead when you add all of this. anyways, I should do a better job discussing this particular point, but the general kind of importance of this graphic is even though it would be expected that an individual who attends college will make more over their lifetimes, you have to look at the fact that, well, if debt is taken out to fund going to that traditional college, that is a cost. And not only is that initial debt cost, but the compound interest that occurs on the debt is a cost that has to be taken into account. So although the year to year earnings of the college graduate might be greater than the year to year earnings of the trade school graduate only had to outlay $37,000 with minimal interest compounding, assuming they both took debts. And when you factor that in, it's actually very even, especially if the trade school person finishes, is able to get to work sooner, and the person who maybe would have gone to trade school but tried to force college, and they're just that's not everyone thrives in that environment. That is why this number is so high. People who don't graduate. If that individual does not end up graduating, now they're in a really bad situation because they have this college debt. They don't have the diploma to get a higher paying job or career, right? And they've wasted time messing around in traditional college and don't have the skills and what they would have gotten in trade school. So I think it's no, no, I don't think it gets talked about enough as like a very real option that people should explore. Um, don't know what's right for you. You can take a Myers-Briggs test. This is basically a career personality test that might be able to help. It's important to understand this is a tool, not a prescription. I would not rely on the Myers-Briggs to tell you what you should do. I think you should take considerable thought to what do I want to spend a lot of the time in my life pursuing in terms of like a career. But the Myers-Briggs can be helpful in generating some ideas and getting you to maybe think about different occupations that you may not even be aware of. And finally, here, you know what? That's probably a good place for us to pause for this video. I said a half an hour. I think we're at an hour. But, anyways, that is going to be week one. Oh my gosh, can I find there it is. That's going to be week one. Main takeaways are the financial wealth creation ladder. Individuals are going to follow a specific steps in order to obtain wealth over time. I would take away that thinking about finances in terms of percentages, right? Make a think of your micro financial decisions in terms of percentages. Think of the water example, right? And buy the Aquafina versus buy the Boss, where that's 158% more expensive. Think of it that way versus it's only $2. And yeah, just understand that there are major financial decisions, there are micro financial decisions, and we'll talk more about those the next week. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this was helpful.